Welcome back to Real America. My next guest is an Arizona Congresswoman who is actually doing her job. And get this, she's reaching across the aisle to get new legislation passed that will help victims of sexual assault in the workplace. It's now receiving bipartisan support. Can you believe it? In Washington, D.C. I love this Congresswoman. Debbie Lesko joining Real America. Thanks for coming on the show. Debbie, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm in Arizona. It's paradise here.
Well, so hopefully I wasn't too sarcastic, but in this political climate, when we hear that Republicans and Democrats are actually working on legislation for the American people that help us, I'm sorry, but we're stunned sometimes. So I know that you've created this bill, and I think I've heard you've co-authored it with a Democrat. You can fill us in on who and where they're from, called Carrie's Law, which you're going to be presenting later this week, Thursday, Friday. Fill folks in on the background of what Carrie's Law is going to help do for sexual assault victims.
You bet, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
Carrie Bob came to my office, just a wonderful professional woman who was a top leader in a large real estate development corporation. And she told me that an executive had given her a bunch of drugs and raped her. And then she realized that when she first started her employment at, I think she was 23 years old when she first started with this company, that in the contract was an employment contract that included mandatory arbitration, even for such things as sexual assault.
Wow.
So I have partnered with Karen Bass, the Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, and myself have partnered together to do the Carrie's Law, and we're going to be introducing it. And it basically allows the victim to choose if they want to use arbitration or if they want to go to civil court when there are instances of physical, violent, sexual assault. And I think we have a good chance of passing this. Now, since the U.S. House of Representatives is Democrat controlled, we have to convince Chairman Jerry Nadler in the Judiciary Committee to hear the bill.
Jerry.
Now, that's why it's important that Republicans and Democrats work together on big issues like this. Even in this hostile environment where I debate Karen Bass and Jerry Nadler and everything, especially on impeachment and the crazy things that are going on, it's always refreshing to know we can come together on issues that are so important. And Carrie Bob had such a compelling story that when I had a dinner, this was about a year ago, with Karen Bass, she had legislation that was important to her that I helped Republicans vote for. And so she has agreed to help me with this legislation. I'm hoping that she is able to convince Jerry Nadler to hear this bill so we can pass it out of Judiciary, then pass it out of the U.S. House of Representatives. And then we'll have to keep on continuing to try to get it passed in the Senate. And of course, I know President Trump would sign it into law. Yeah,
well, first you got to convince Jerry that Antifa is an organization and exists. But that's another story for another day. I'm just so glad to see that someone can reach across the aisle and that both sides might actually work on legislation that help the American people. And this seems like Carrie's Law a no-brainer to me. I mean, so you're signing away your right to sue them, take them to court in civil or criminal court if you get drugged and raped or sexually assaulted or harassed because you signed a non-disclosure almost where you have to go to mediation. You can't take them to court. Sounds pretty acceptable to me. I would hope most legislators will sign that. Debbie, thanks for coming on the show, explaining what Carrie's Law will be. You're going to present this week, correct? What day?
Yeah, I think tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm so thankful to do this because not only does it do what it helps alleviate the problem that you've addressed, but also there's this secrecy. Nobody else in the company knew what happened to Carrie Bob because she was restricted from saying anything. And so then that same man perpetrated other employees in the company.
Wow.
And so this is wrong and it has to be changed. And I'm glad we can work on some things together in a bipartisan fashion.
Well, let's see if it gets done. Come back on the show in a while and let us know. And I do want to point out, because you know how the lamestream media likes to twist things, I do want to point out that Carrie Bob is the sister of Christina Bobb, who works for One America News in our D.C. bureau. And this is how life happens, folks. There was a connection made because obviously her sister works for us. She interviews you and other congresspeople and senators on the Hill and the president. And so you talk about what happens to your family members, you're outraged, you bring it up, and then guess what? An elected leader takes notice and creates a bill. This is how things happen in society. So I just wanted to point that out there before somebody tries to twist this around that we covered it. Congresswoman Debbie Lesko from the great state of Arizona, thank you so much. Let us know what happens with Kerry's Law, okay?
Thank you.
All right, coming up, he's become a regular fixture here on Real America. My buddy Chad Prather, a.k.a. the political cowboy, will join me next to discuss all the day's headlines. Don't go away.